For a second lesson, verses from the Gospel according to Luke, the 2nd chapter. And behold, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon, and the same man was just and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel. And it was revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he should not see death before he had seen the Lord's Messiah. And he came by the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him after the custom of the law, he took him up in his arms and blessed God, and said, Lord, now let thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word, for my eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people, a light to lighten the Gentiles, and the glory of thy people Israel. I've always found it a rather strange time of the year, sort of between the times, Christmas Eve, the clock sort of stops in the sentiment and glow of the crowds and the carols and the candles, and it really doesn't start up again until midnight Friday. The glow, of course, is already fading. The needles have replaced the gifts beneath your trees. That is, if you have one of those trees. I know it's absolute heresy for someone from Michigan, that's where the trees come from, you know, to go plastic, but we succumbed a few years ago when we discovered that you could buy an artificial tree for the same price annually of one of those real ones. Of course, this year, since we're leaving tonight, we didn't even put up the big plastic. Well, as a matter of fact, my wife found a little scrawny thing at the resale shop at Presbyterian Homes, and she felt so sorry for it, she bought it and brought it home. Outside of curvature of the spine, it's really rather cute. And we sprayed it with pine scent, so there. But the melancholy revelry of New Year's Eve is not here yet, that fateful sense of time passing, especially now with the Millennium Park just around the corner. We don't get to celebrate very many millennia, do we? It's always a double whammy for me, coming the night after the night I'm a year older. And what do people celebrate about that anyway? You watch them on television, Times Square, cheering, whistling, screaming, kissing as that ball descends. Watch them and wonder what they're cheering about. The loss of another 12 months of life. Perhaps the fact that they've survived it all. Or maybe they're just trying to forget what the ball is saying. You're getting older. A good friend sent me a card a couple of years ago. The front cover said, you cannot turn back the clock. You open it up and it says, but you can wind it up again. So I try. Clearly, the turn of another year is a pretty bleak and barren event unless we can see it as more than just time slipping away from us. It has meaning only if we can let it be the occasion for stirrings within us of new courage and new hope toward that future that is rushing at us. In other words, unless we can bring to it the real meaning of the holiday just past, the spirit of Christmas. Maybe it is a good thing that they come so close together. Maybe the first can save the second from just binge and despair. Otherwise, New Year's Eve, as someone has said, descends into an affair where we go in like a lion and out like a light. What is our major problem with this coming midnight and all that it signals? Is it not the sort of low-grade apprehension, foreboding, or fear that it can stir up within us? In a Frank and Ernest comic strip, Frank announces, congratulations, Ernie, you've just been elected president of our local phobia club. And Ernie replies, I was afraid of that. But specifically, there is in all of us, not on the surface always, but there is in all of us a bit of anxiety, if not foreboding, about tomorrow and what it may bring. Basil King, I think, describes our common experience rather well. When I say that during my conscious life I've been a prey of fears, I take it for granted that I'm expressing the case of the majority of us. I cannot remember a time when some dread or other was not somewhere in the air. In childhood, it was the fear of going to bed in the dark. Later it was the fear of school, the first contact of an innocent soul with life's crudeness. Later still, there was the experience which all of us know of waking in the morning with a feeling of dismay at what we have to do upon getting out of bed. Fear dogs us one way or another. The mother is afraid for her child, the father is afraid for the business, the executive is afraid for his job. There's not a home or factory or office or school or church in which some hang-dong apprehension is not sort of eating away at the heart. Isn't that what tends to trouble us about the future, if we think about it? It is so uncertain and so unknown, and we fear the very real possibilities that may lie in wait to ambush us. Economic trouble, personal or national, could happen, you know, unavoidable accident. Friend across the street fell and broke his leg yesterday. War that may take our children, our grandchildren. Disease or disability, loss, loneliness. Albert Camus called this century fading the century of fear. And we do see on every hand people whose lives are under the strain of unrelieved anxiety. What's the answer? The only answer I know is back there a few days before in the Christmas story. Old man Simeon sums it all up in one of the first Christmas songs, along with Mary's, a song we have never set to music, unfortunately. And what is the song all about? This Christmas carol for the coming year. My eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people. It's a song that says, there is another on our side. Even as I say that, I wonder if we've not been so formed by contemporary and secular ways of viewing reality, thinking about life, that it's almost impossible for us to really take it seriously, other than as pulpit talk on Sunday morning. That we really, you and I, really have something going for us, other than the vagaries of the stock market, the unpredictability of our health, the accidents of life, something invisible, intangible, but very real, that God is with us in our future, working out our salvation, our growth, our health, our happiness, that we can walk into tomorrow trusting Him to be there with us, giving us the strength we need to deal with whatever comes, creatively, constructively. Of course, this seeing of Simon is a seeing which is not seeing, because it is seeing with the eyes of faith. The seeing of a Simeon who looks at a simple, ordinary child in his arm and sees the presence of God in this world. The trouble with this culture and time is that it more and more refuses to believe in anything other than the visible, the tangible, the provable. People today seem to have something in their hands to rely upon, something they can control. In the little volume, The Wisdom of Charlie Brown, there's a chapter on problem solving, and Linus is saying to Charlie Brown, look, Charlie Brown, you have fears and you have frustrations. Am I right? Of course I'm right. So what you need is a blanket like this one to soak up all those fears and frustrations. Charlie Brown gets a sad look on his face and he says, I don't know. I think most of life's problems are too complicated to be solved with a spiritual blotter. The reality is there are no concrete guarantees for tomorrow, and we can face it with hope and courage only as before its mystery we learn to face it with God. There is a poem which I've sometimes read at this time of the year. I'm sure you've heard it. And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown. And he replied, go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way. Remember it? What you may not remember is that King George IV of Great Britain first read this poem in his Christmas broadcast to the world in 1939, just as Europe was bursting into the cruelty and uncertainty and wanton death of World War II. If ever the future seemed uncertain, if not hopeless, that certainly was such a time. And yet the leader of his people urges them to remember that God also walks with them into that future. And it was this faith, more than sentimental comfort or security blanket, which enabled English men and women to hold on when any reading of the facts would have told them to surrender. And wise men were telling them to do just that. which gave them the indomitable spirit and courage to create new facts and new future. And this is what real faith in God always does. Faith that He is present to our story, faith that He is working out His will in our lives. It enables us to rise above the tyranny of facts. The facts in the day of Simeon were self-evident. The domination of the ruling elite, the incredible imperial power of Rome, the madness of the mobs. But Simeon didn't live by these. He lived by a faith that enabled him to see new hope and new possibility in a newborn babe. And what about the facts in your life this day, this week, this morning? Economic uncertainty, or troubled relationship, or discouraging medical reports, or just the batterings of age? What are the facts of your life that seem to foreclose the future? The old story says that they're not the whole story. There is one at your side, on your side, involved in your life, ready to give you the strength and ingenuity, the courage and insight to uncover new possibilities, new relationships, new enthusiasms, new ways. This, of course, does not mean that God guarantees smooth, painless, untroubled, easy paths through the way ahead. Simeon knew this. This child, this salvation, this healing will be rejected, and it will pierce your heart, little mother. I'm amazed at times how people turn to God in a moment of crisis and difficulty and need, expecting Him to be a problem solver, a rescuer. And when He doesn't come through quite as they want, they give up on Him in anger, if not in doubt, that He even is there. I encounter people in sadness and grief who miss what He has to give because they're angry at what He has not given. And I understand, I've been there. But what can I say? Most of the time, God is not rescuer, not in the life of Jesus or Paul, not in yours, not in mine, unless and until we reconcile ourselves to that reality, that pain and problem will always be there out into tomorrow. Only then are we really able to see and receive what God also may be trying to do for us. For Jesus, trust in God always included the possibility of suffering, of rejection, of cross. And it is precisely those who learn to hope and trust right in the midst of those, in the midst of the mess, the setbacks, the sorrows, who are able out of it all to work wonders and truly win. In many ways, this was the faith and the hope that made this country in this century. Many years ago, another infant was born in Germany, crippled from birth. His body was so grotesque, so short in stature, that as a young lad he looked much like a hunchback dwarf. His mother died before he was 1 year old. His father was poor, but was determined that as far as possible, young Charles would have a good education. Charles couldn't run and play games as normal boys did. Finally, he was able to immigrate to the United States, but couldn't speak a word of English, and the port authorities were tempted to return him to his native Germany. His face was swollen from the cold he had endured on the passage. His sight was defective. His clothes were shabby. If anyone had a right to curse God and declare life unfair, he did. But he had faith that God was with him in the midst of this impossible adventure, and he made up his mind that he would devote his life to science, to make discoveries that would help others. He stayed here. He even found a job that paid him 12 hours a week. He developed his abilities to the point where an infant company by the name of General Electric took him on, and there his career was marked by unparalleled research and development to which we are all indebted this morning, even for the light that shines upon us. For among other things, he was the inventor of alternating current. When Charles Steinmetz died in 1923, one man wrote of him, "This deformed hunchback had the mind of an angel and the soul of a saint. Though twisted and dwarfed in body, in mind and spirit, he was a giant of faith." I told this story many years ago, and an elderly friend in Boston, now gone, wrote me a letter shortly thereafter, and in it he said, "I knew Charles Steinmetz, and you got it wrong." I swallowed hard and read on. He was born in Germany, not in Switzerland, and indeed I had misplaced his birth. And then he went on, otherwise he was everything you said he was and more. Trust in God, the hope in God that wades right through life's adversity and setbacks and wins. At our side in the crosses of life, and most importantly, in the final cross, trust that not even life's greatest challenge can defeat his love and purpose for us. Lord, now let thy servant depart in peace. I think I need to know that is possible as I face tomorrow, that when departure time comes, I shall be able to face it in peace. Because behind all my other fears and anxieties is, I think, this final fear. I fear all these others in a way because they all at the bottom speak of this. And unless I can face this and come to some peace in the face of it, as he did, as old Simeon did, this deep subterranean fear will infect all my endeavors and cause me to flee into escapes of my own invention, play loose with life's loyalties. Only as I am able to walk toward my final days with my hand in God's, am I able to live responsibly and with zest and with joy this day. Some of us very well may not be here a year from now. And that thought can drive us to drink or to flight or to God. I have always admired the spirit of Aunt Sadie, who was 99, the oldest resident in a small town in Pennsylvania, and among the guests at her birthday party was her pastor, only 39. As he was preparing to leave, he said, "Now, Sadie, I hope that 1 year from this very day, I will be able to come back and celebrate your 100th birthday with you." She looked at him with a jaundiced eye and said, "I don't know why not. You look pretty healthy to me." Every New Year's, I go back to a little piece I found many years ago in a book by a research psychologist up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I read him again to you. Life is like riding on a fast train. On the horizon, long for events loll far off there in the future, and then they suddenly arrive, and then whoosh, they become but a part of a dim past. Our existence is a rapid succession of never returning moments. Throughout my teenage years and early 20s, I lacked this sense of life's transiency. I could hardly wait for my firstborn son to get on with growing up and for myself to arrive at real life, full adult life. Now I am where I wanted to be. That firstborn is 15 and his 3-year-old sister is growing up far too fast. Watching my children grow up is like viewing a time-lapse film of unfolding flowers. I wish that I could periodically halt time and savor longer the pleasures of each day, lingering over each little affectionate smile on Laurie's small face. But it is as futile as my trying to stop that racing train. Several friends have died recently. My parents are growing old, and precious memories from my past are slipping away. Another of times I blinks and Laurie will be old enough to read these words, if not yet old enough to grasp the poignancy of the life cycle. Here in Michigan, it is winter. In our house, we turn the heat down at night, prompting my wife Carol and me to sleep snuggled under the covers like a pair of gerbils. The secure affection of this intimate relationship provides delicious moments. But the deeper the feeling, the sadder the realization that we are growing older and that there will come a day when one of us will sleep alone. And then a day when we shall be separated from our children by an unbridgeable gulf. Pondering these troubling thoughts, I am driven to the conviction that there is either a loving God who is behind it all, or else life is indeed an absurdity as people on this infinitesimal planet come and go talking of Michelangelo. Having reached the halfway point of my life expectancy, I am increasingly driven to see life in an eternal perspective, to find reassurance in a being whose love and power is my only enduring hope in the face of my frailty. Because of his great promise, I can hope for grace both now and in the eternal future. For in him there is always a tomorrow. My eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people. And thank God, that includes you and me. Wherever you go in the years to come, go in peace. Amen.